Hafizullah Amin, Revolutionary Ambitions and the Collapse of a Nation. Part 1. Early Life and Education. Hafizullah Amin, a name etched into the tumultuous annals of Afghanistan's modern history, was born on August 1, 1929, in the serene village of Khalq, nestled amidst the verdant hills of Paghman in Kabul province. This rural community, known for its picturesque beauty and cultural vibrancy, served as the unassuming cradle for a man destined to play a transformative role in his nation's history. Amin was born into the Karoti Gilzai Pashtun tribe, a lineage steeped in traditions of resilience and independence, characteristics that would profoundly influence his character and later endeavors. The early years of Hafizullah's life were marked by both simplicity and struggle. His father, a civil servant dedicated to his work, provided for the family with modest means. However, the family's stability was shattered in 1937 when Amin's father passed away unexpectedly, leaving 8-year-old Hafizullah and his siblings to navigate life without paternal guidance. In this challenging period, the responsibility of the household fell on the shoulders of Amin's elder brother, Abdullah. A primary school teacher by profession, Abdullah assumed the dual roles of guardian and mentor, becoming a pivotal figure in Hafizullah's formative years. Abdullah's commitment to education and his unyielding belief in its transformative power left an indelible mark on young Hafizullah. Despite the family's financial hardships, Abdullah ensured that Hafizullah received a solid education, believing it to be the key to a brighter future. Under his brother's guidance, Hafizullah demonstrated an early aptitude for academics, excelling in his studies and earning recognition as a diligent and capable student. His journey through local primary and secondary schools laid the foundation for what would become a remarkable intellectual and professional career. In his late teens, Hafizullah Amin's academic potential earned him admission to Kabul University, KU, one of Afghanistan's most prestigious institutions. Opting to major in mathematics, Amin immersed himself in a field that demanded precision, logic, and critical thinking. The university environment provided him not only with academic rigor, but also with exposure to diverse ideas and perspectives. It was during his time at KU that Amin began to develop the leadership qualities and analytical skills that would later define his political career. The vibrant intellectual atmosphere of Kabul University, coupled with its role as a hub of socio-political discourse, expanded Amin's worldview and deepened his understanding of Afghanistan's complexities. After completing his degree at KU, Amin pursued further studies at the Darul Muallimin Teachers College in Kabul, an esteemed institution dedicated to nurturing the nation's educators. Here he refined his teaching skills and developed a profound appreciation for the role of education in societal transformation. Amin's early professional life saw him rise through the ranks of the educational system, starting as a teacher and eventually becoming the vice principal and later principal of Abyssinia High School, one of Kabul's most prestigious secondary schools. His tenure at Abyssinia was marked by a commitment to educational reform as he sought to modernize teaching methods and curricula. His colleagues and students admired him for his dedication, vision, and ability to inspire. Amin's career took a significant turn in 1957 when he received a scholarship to study in the United States. This opportunity marked the beginning of a transformative chapter in his life. Traveling to New York City, Amin enrolled at Columbia University, where he pursued a Master of Arts in Education. The dynamic academic environment of Columbia exposed him to a variety of political ideologies and intellectual traditions. It was here that Amin first encountered Marxist thought, which began to shape his burgeoning worldview. His interactions with students and professors from diverse cultural and ideological backgrounds broadened his perspective, fostering a critical understanding of global socio-political dynamics. During his time at Columbia, Amin's interest in political and social justice deepened. He became actively involved in discussions and movements advocating for equality and systemic reform. His engagement with the university's Socialist Progressive Club allowed him to delve into Marxist theories and principles, which resonated deeply with his own observations of inequality and exploitation in Afghan society. These experiences, combined with his academic pursuits, left a profound impact on his ideological development. Amin's exposure to the United States extended beyond Columbia University. In 1962, he participated in a work-study program at the University of Wisconsin, further broadening his academic and ideological horizons. This period of study and engagement with progressive student movements solidified his commitment to Marxist ideology. Critics and historians often point to this phase of Amin's life as a turning point, where his political consciousness evolved into a revolutionary conviction. Upon returning to Afghanistan in the mid-1960s, Amin resumed his role as an educator at Kabul University. His lectures, however, extended beyond mathematics, frequently touching upon broader themes of social justice and political reform. During this time, he reconnected with Nur Muhammad Taraki, a fellow Marxist intellectual and co-founder of the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, PDPA. The two shared a vision of a socialist Afghanistan, free from feudal oppression and foreign influence. Amin's growing involvement with the PDPA marked the beginning of his transition from educator to political leader. Amin's early life and educational journey were a blend of personal adversity, intellectual growth, and ideological awakening. The resilience he exhibited in overcoming familial hardships, combined with his academic achievements and exposure to global political movements, shaped a leader with a unique blend of pragmatism and idealism. As he entered the political arena, Amin carried with him the lessons of his past, determined to forge a path toward a more equitable and progressive Afghanistan. Part 2. Political Awakening and Early Struggles. Hafizullah Amin's transition from an educator to a political figure was neither sudden nor coincidental. By the mid-1960s, Afghanistan was undergoing significant socio-political changes, as traditional structures were being challenged by emerging ideologies and reformist movements. Amin, deeply influenced by his exposure to Marxist principles during his time in the United States, returned to his homeland with a burning desire to enact change. He believed that Afghanistan's feudal and monarchical systems perpetuated inequality and oppression, and he sought to challenge these structures by engaging in political activism. In 1965, Amin joined the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, PDPA, a newly formed political party founded by Nur Muhammad Taraki and Babrak Karmal. The PDPA's primary goal was to establish a socialist state in Afghanistan, guided by Marxist-Leninist ideology. The party's founding was a direct response to the socio-economic challenges faced by the country, including widespread poverty, illiteracy, and an entrenched feudal system. For Amin, the PDPA represented a vehicle through which he could channel his revolutionary ideas and aspirations. The PDPA, however, was not a monolithic entity. It was plagued by internal divisions from its inception, with two primary factions emerging: Khalq, masses, led by Taraki and Amin, and Paghman, banner, led by Karmal. These factions differed not only in their ideological approaches, but also in their social bases and political strategies. The Khalq faction, which drew its support primarily from rural Pashtuns, advocated for radical and immediate reforms. In contrast, the Paghman faction, supported by urban elites and ethnic minorities, favored a more gradual and conciliatory approach. Amin's alignment with the Khalq faction was driven by his belief in the necessity of swift and uncompromising action to dismantle Afghanistan's feudal and reactionary structures. Despite the factionalism within the PDPA, Amin quickly established himself as a prominent figure within the Khalq faction. His charisma, organizational skills, and ideological clarity earned him the respect of his peers and the loyalty of many party members. In 1965, he ran as a PDPA candidate in the parliamentary elections, campaigning on a platform of land reform, social justice, and anti-imperialism. Although he narrowly lost, the campaign elevated his profile and solidified his reputation as a staunch advocate for the working class and rural poor. Amin's political activities during this period were not limited to electoral campaigns. He also focused on building the PDPA's organizational capacity, particularly in rural areas where the party sought to expand its influence. Recognizing the importance of education in mobilizing support, Amin leveraged his background as an educator to disseminate Marxist ideas among students, teachers, and other intellectuals. He believed that education was a powerful tool for awakening political consciousness and empowering marginalized communities. Under his leadership, the Khalq faction intensified its efforts to recruit members and establish a strong grassroots presence. However, Amin's growing influence within the PDPA was not without challenges. His relationship with Babrak Karmal and the Paghman faction was marked by mutual distrust and rivalry. The ideological and strategic differences between the two factions often erupted into open confrontations, further exacerbating the party's internal divisions. Amin accused Karmal of being too conciliatory toward the monarchy and of compromising the party's revolutionary ideals. These tensions reached a boiling point in 1967, leading to a formal split within the PDPA. The division weakened the party's ability to present a united front against the monarchy, but it also allowed Amin and the Khalq faction to pursue their revolutionary agenda with greater autonomy. Despite these internal conflicts, Amin's political career continued to ascend. In 1969, he achieved a significant milestone by becoming the only Khalqist member elected to parliament. This victory was a testament to his ability to connect with the electorate and articulate a vision of change that resonated with many Afghans. As a parliamentarian, Amin was an outspoken critic of the monarchy, denouncing its policies as feudal and reactionary. His fiery speeches in parliament often highlighted the plight of Afghanistan's rural poor, calling for comprehensive land reforms and greater state intervention to address social and economic inequalities. Amin's tenure in parliament also provided him with a platform to strengthen his ties with the military, a key institution in Afghanistan's political landscape. He recognized that the armed forces would play a crucial role in any revolutionary movement, and he worked tirelessly to recruit progressive-minded officers who shared the PDPA's vision of a socialist future. These efforts were instrumental in laying the groundwork for the party's eventual rise to power. His unwavering commitment to Marxist-Leninist principles, coupled with his organizational acumen and ability to inspire loyalty, positioned him as a key player in Afghanistan's burgeoning revolutionary movement. However, his journey was far from over. As the country's political landscape grew increasingly volatile, Amin's leadership and vision would be tested in ways that would define his legacy. Part 3, Building the Revolution, the Prelude to Power. By the early 1970s, Hafizullah Amin had solidified his position as a key figure within the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, PDPA, and an advocate for sweeping reform. Afghanistan's socio-political environment at the time was rife with tension, as the monarchy under King Zahir Shah struggled to address the nation's systemic challenges. Widespread poverty, feudal landholding systems, and a lack of political freedoms created fertile ground for revolutionary ideologies. Amin, driven by his Marxist-Leninist convictions, began laying the groundwork for a movement that would forever alter the course of Afghanistan's history. The fall of the monarchy and the emergence of Daoud Khan. In 1973, a pivotal moment unfolded in Afghan politics when Mohammed Daoud Khan, a cousin of King Zahir Shah, staged a bloodless coup and declared Afghanistan a republic. Daoud's ascent to power was initially met with cautious optimism by the PDPA, particularly the Paghman faction, which sought to collaborate with the new regime. Amin's opposition to Daoud's government was rooted in his belief that true reform could only be achieved through a Marxist revolution. He intensified his efforts to expand the PDPA's influence, particularly within the military, which he regarded as a critical institution for any revolutionary movement. Organizing the Khalq faction. Within the Khalq faction, Amin emerged as a driving force behind its organizational and strategic initiatives. Amin's ability to communicate the party's goals and mobilize grassroots support played a pivotal role in strengthening the Khalq faction's position within the broader PDPA. Amin's recruitment efforts extended beyond the military to include intellectuals, students, and laborers. He believed that a broad-based coalition was essential for a successful revolution. His speeches emphasized themes of social justice, land redistribution, and the elimination of feudal oppression, resonating deeply with those who felt marginalized by the existing system. Under Amin's guidance, the Khalq faction developed a robust organizational structure capable of executing its revolutionary agenda. The Daoud era, growing repression and resistance. As Daoud Khan consolidated his power, his regime became increasingly authoritarian. Political dissent was met with repression, and opposition parties, including the PDPA, faced arrests and crackdowns. The Khalq faction, led by Amin and Taraki, was particularly targeted due to its growing influence within the military and its unwavering commitment to revolutionary ideals. These actions only served to deepen Amin's resolve and strengthen his conviction that armed struggle was necessary to achieve meaningful change. The period of repression under Daoud's rule saw Amin operating under constant threat. Despite the risks, he continued to organize clandestine meetings, maintain communication with his network of military supporters, and plan for the eventual overthrow of the regime. Amin's ability to operate effectively under such conditions demonstrated his resilience and strategic acumen. The Khalq-Parcham rift, a strategic dilemma, the ideological and strategic differences between the Khalq and Parcham factions of the PDPA reached a critical juncture during the Daoud era. While the Parcham faction, led by Babrak Karmal, sought to work within the framework of Daoud's government, Amin and the Khalq faction viewed such collaboration as a betrayal of the party's revolutionary principles. This fundamental disagreement led to increasing tensions and ultimately a split within the PDPA. Amin's criticisms of the Parcham faction were scathing. He accused Karmal and his allies of compromising the party's ideals for political expediency. These accusations were not without merit, as the Parcham faction's alignment with Daoud's government alienated many within the PDPA's rank and file. Amin's steadfast adherence to Marxist-Leninist principles and his refusal to compromise earned him the loyalty of a significant portion of the party's base, further consolidating his influence within the Khalq faction. Preparing for revolution, laying the groundwork. By the mid-1970s, Amin and the Khalq faction were actively preparing for a revolutionary uprising. Recognizing the importance of timing and coordination, Amin focused on strengthening the party's organizational capacity and expanding its influence within key institutions. His efforts to cultivate loyalty among military officers continued to bear fruit, as the PDPA's network within the armed forces grew in both size and influence. Amin also emphasized the importance of ideological training for party members. He believed that a successful revolution required not only military strength, but also a clear understanding of Marxist principles among its leaders and supporters. Under his guidance, the Khalq faction developed educational programs to train cadres in revolutionary theory and strategy. These efforts ensured that the party's leadership was equipped to navigate the complex challenges of governance once power was seized. The assassination of Mir Akbar Khyber. A turning point in the lead-up to the revolution was the assassination of Mir Akbar Khyber, a prominent Parcham ideologue, in April 1978. Although the circumstances surrounding his death remain unclear, it was widely believed to be the work of Daoud's regime. Khyber's assassination galvanized the PDPA as party members and supporters rallied in outrage. Amin seized this moment to accelerate plans for revolutionary action, recognizing that the growing discontent among the populace and within the military could be harnessed to overthrow the regime. The public reaction to Khyber's death demonstrated the PDPA's ability to mobilize mass support. His funeral turned into a massive anti-government demonstration, with thousands of participants openly expressing their opposition to Daoud's rule. For Amin, this event underscored the urgency of the situation and the need for decisive action. The final preparations. In the weeks following Khyber's assassination, Amin and the Khalq leadership worked tirelessly to finalize their plans for the revolution. They coordinated with military allies, established communication networks, and identified key targets for the uprising. Amin's strategic foresight and attention to detail were instrumental in ensuring that the PDPA was prepared to act when the moment arrived. As Afghanistan edged closer to the events of the Saur Revolution, Hafizullah Amin's role as a strategist and leader became increasingly evident. His ability to navigate the complexities of factional politics, mobilize support, and maintain focus on the party's revolutionary goals positioned him as a central figure in the PDPA's push for power. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation that would reshape Afghanistan's political landscape. Part 4. The Saur Revolution, a nation transformed. The morning of April 27, 1978, marked the beginning of a dramatic upheaval in Afghanistan's political landscape. Known as the Saur Revolution, this meticulously coordinated coup orchestrated by the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, PDPA, brought an end to the regime of President Mohammed Daoud Khan and ushered in the era of the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, DRA. Hafizullah Amin, as one of the revolution's principal architects, played a pivotal role in planning and executing the overthrow, securing his place as a key figure in this transformative event. The lead-up to revolution, the assassination of Mir Akbar Khyber, a prominent Parsham ideologue, had acted as a catalyst for the PDPA's revolutionary plans. Following Khyber's funeral, which turned into a massive anti-government demonstration, the Daoud regime responded with repression, arresting key PDPA members, including Nur Muhammad Taraki and Babrak Karmal. However, Hafizullah Amin, through a combination of luck and strategic foresight, evaded arrest. From his undisclosed location, Amin took charge of the party's operations and began coordinating with military allies to initiate the coup. The decision to act swiftly was driven by a recognition that delay would only lead to further repression. Amin's years of groundwork within the military now paid off, as he activated the network of officers loyal to the PDPA. His ability to communicate and mobilize these forces under immense pressure highlighted his exceptional organizational skills and strategic acumen. The revolution unfolds. At dawn on April 27, 1978, the revolution commenced. PDPA-aligned military units launched coordinated attacks on key government installations in Kabul. Tanks and armored vehicles rolled through the streets, while Air Force pilots loyal to the PDPA bombed the presidential palace. The coup was executed with precision, thanks to Amin's meticulous planning and the loyalty of the military officers he had cultivated over the years. The fiercest resistance came from the presidential palace, where Mohammed Daoud Khan and his family made a last stand. Despite their efforts, the overwhelming firepower of the PDPA-aligned forces quickly overwhelmed the palace's defenses. By the evening, Daoud Khan was dead, and the PDPA declared victory. The swift and decisive nature of the coup demonstrated the effectiveness of Amin's leadership and the depth of his planning. Establishing the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan. On April 28, 1978, the PDPA announced the establishment of the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan. Nur Muhammad Taraki, as the party's general secretary, assumed the roles of president and prime minister. Hafizullah Amin, recognized for his critical contributions to the revolution, was appointed deputy prime minister and minister of foreign affairs. These titles, however, understated the extent of Amin's influence within the new government. As one of the key architects of the revolution, Amin wielded significant power behind the scenes, shaping policies and decisions that would define the DRA's early years. The revolution's immediate aftermath saw the PDPA implement sweeping reforms aimed at transforming Afghanistan into a socialist state. These reforms included land redistribution, the promotion of women's rights, and efforts to modernize education and healthcare. Amin, as one of the principal architects of these policies, played a central role in articulating the vision of a new Afghanistan based on Marxist-Leninist principles. Challenges and controversies. While the Saur Revolution marked a significant victory for the PDPA, it also exposed deep-seated challenges that would plague the new government. The violent and abrupt nature of the coup alienated large segments of the population, particularly those who valued Afghanistan's traditional social structures. Many viewed the PDPA's reforms as an attack on Islam and tribal traditions, leading to widespread resistance in both rural and urban areas. Moreover, the internal divisions within the PDPA persisted despite the revolution's success. The Khalq and Paghman factions continued to vie for influence, with Amin's dominance within the Khalq faction exacerbating tensions. His assertive leadership style and unyielding commitment to radical reform often brought him into conflict with other members of the party, including Paghman leaders such as Babrak Karmal. Amin's role as the strongman, Hafizullah Amin's role in the post-revolutionary government extended far beyond his official titles. As a driving force within the Khalq faction, he emerged as a strongman whose influence shaped many of the government's decisions. Amin's focus on consolidating power and advancing the PDPA's revolutionary agenda often led to controversial policies, including the suppression of dissent and the marginalization of Paghman leaders. Amin's ability to inspire loyalty among his supporters and maintain control over key institutions, such as the military and security apparatus, further cemented his position within the government. However, his assertive approach also drew criticism, both from within the PDPA and from the broader population. Many viewed his policies as overly aggressive, contributing to the growing unrest that would soon challenge the DRA's stability. Legacy of the Saur Revolution. The Saur Revolution was a watershed moment in Afghanistan's history, reshaping the nation's political, social, and economic landscape. For Hafizullah Amin, the revolution represented the culmination of years of effort and dedication to the cause of Marxist-Leninist reform. His role as a key architect of the coup and his subsequent influence within the government underscored his importance in shaping Afghanistan's revolutionary trajectory. However, the revolution also marked the beginning of a period of intense challenges and controversies. The PDPA's ambitious reforms, coupled with its internal divisions and the resistance it faced from traditional and religious elements, set the stage for a turbulent era in Afghanistan's history. For Amin, the Saur Revolution was both a triumph and a prelude to the struggles that would define his tenure as one of Afghanistan's most controversial leaders. Part 5. Amin's rise to absolute power. The aftermath of the Saur Revolution saw a rapid consolidation of power by the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, PDPA, with Hafizullah Amin emerging as one of its most prominent and ambitious figures. His ascent to near absolute authority within the party and government, however, was anything but smooth. The months following the revolution were marked by internal rivalries, ideological conflicts, and growing resistance from within Afghanistan's traditional power structures. Amid these challenges, Amin's tenacity and strategic prowess positioned him as the undisputed strongman of the regime. Post-revolutionary reforms and resistance. After the overthrow of President Mohammed Daoud Khan, the PDPA sought to transform Afghanistan into a socialist state aligned with Marxist-Leninist principles. The party's agenda included sweeping reforms such as land redistribution, the abolition of feudal privileges, and the promotion of gender equality. Educational initiatives were launched to combat illiteracy, and efforts were made to modernize healthcare and infrastructure. Hafizullah Amin, as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, played a central role in shaping and implementing these policies. Despite their ambitious scope, these reforms faced significant resistance. Afghanistan's predominantly rural population, deeply rooted in Islamic traditions and tribal structures, viewed the PDPA's agenda as an affront to their way of life. The forced redistribution of land and changes to family law, which aimed to empower women, provoked widespread outrage. Clerics and tribal leaders accused the government of undermining Islamic values, leading to the emergence of armed uprisings in several provinces. Amin's response to this resistance was characteristically assertive. He believed that the survival of the revolution depended on the government's ability to suppress dissent and enforce its policies. Under his direction, the regime intensified its efforts to root out opposition, using both military force and political repression. Thousands of perceived counter-revolutionaries, including tribal leaders, clerics, and dissident intellectuals, were arrested or executed. While these measures temporarily stabilized the regime, they also alienated large segments of the population and fueled further unrest. The Khalq power struggle, the PDPA's internal divisions, which had existed since its founding, became more pronounced in the months following the Saur Revolution. The rivalry between the Khalq and Paghman factions escalated into a full-blown power struggle, with Hafizullah Amin and Nur Muhammad Taraki representing the Khalq faction and Babrak Karmal leading the Paghman faction. Amin, as one of the chief architects of the revolution, was determined to marginalize the Paghmites, whom he viewed as opportunists lacking commitment to the party's revolutionary ideals. In the weeks after the revolution, Amin successfully maneuvered to sideline key Paghman leaders. Babrak Karmal and several of his allies were sent abroad as ambassadors, effectively removing them from positions of influence. Amin's dominance within the Khalq faction further consolidated his authority, but it also deepened the rift within the PDPA. The purge of Paghmites created a sense of unease among party members and contributed to a growing atmosphere of mistrust and factionalism. Tensions with Nur Muhammad Taraki. Although Amin and Taraki had worked closely to orchestrate the Saur Revolution, their partnership began to deteriorate as differences in leadership style and vision emerged. Taraki, as president and general secretary of the PDPA, sought to present himself as the unifying leader of the revolution. However, Amin's assertive and often unilateral approach to decision-making created friction between the two leaders. Amin's growing influence within the party and his control over key institutions, such as the military and security services, increasingly overshadowed Taraki's authority. The relationship between Amin and Taraki reached a breaking point in mid-1979. Reports of disagreements over policy decisions and governance strategies began to circulate, with some suggesting that Taraki resented Amin's attempts to consolidate power. Amin, in turn, grew frustrated with what he perceived as Taraki's indecisiveness and reluctance to take bold action. These tensions culminated in a dramatic power struggle that would have far-reaching consequences for both leaders. The rise of Amin as supreme leader. In September 1979, the simmering conflict between Amin and Taraki came to a head. After surviving an alleged assassination attempt orchestrated by Taraki's supporters, Amin acted decisively to eliminate his rival. With the backing of loyal military officers and PDPA members, Amin orchestrated a coup that removed Taraki from power. Taraki was arrested and shortly thereafter reportedly suffocated to death on Amin's orders. The coup marked the culmination of Amin's rise to supreme authority within the PDPA and the government. On September 16, 1979, Hafizullah Amin officially assumed the titles of Chairman of the Revolutionary Council, Prime Minister, and General Secretary of the PDPA. These positions gave him control over all branches of government, effectively making him the undisputed leader of Afghanistan. Amin's leadership was characterized by a combination of pragmatism and ruthlessness, as he sought to consolidate power and stabilize the regime in the face of mounting challenges. A vision for Afghanistan. As the head of state, Amin articulated a vision for a modern socialist Afghanistan. He sought to accelerate the implementation of the PDPA's reforms, emphasizing the need to eradicate feudalism, promote industrialization, and expand access to education and healthcare. Amin also attempted to improve the government's image by portraying himself as a devout Muslim, often referencing Islamic principles in his speeches and policies. This strategy was aimed at countering accusations that the PDPA's agenda was anti-Islamic. Despite these efforts, Amin's tenure as leader was marred by growing domestic unrest and international isolation. The resistance to his policies intensified, with insurgent groups gaining momentum in rural areas. At the same time, relations with the Soviet Union, Afghanistan's primary ally, became increasingly strained. Soviet leaders who had initially supported the PDPA began to view Amin with suspicion, criticizing his methods and questioning his loyalty. The road ahead. Hafizullah Amin's rise to power represented both the apex of his political career and the beginning of a period of profound challenges. His leadership style, characterized by boldness and decisiveness, enabled him to consolidate authority and push forward the PDPA's revolutionary agenda. However, his reliance on repression and his inability to win widespread popular support created a precarious foundation for his rule. As Amin navigated the complexities of governing a deeply divided nation, he faced growing opposition from within Afghanistan and mounting pressure from the international community. The challenges of his leadership would soon reach a critical juncture, setting the stage for one of the most consequential periods in Afghanistan's modern history. Part 6. The Strains of Leadership and Growing Isolation. As Hafizullah Amin consolidated his authority as the leader of Afghanistan in late 1979, he faced a volatile landscape both domestically and internationally. The challenges of governing a nation deeply divided by political, ethnic, and religious tensions placed immense strain on his administration. Amin's attempts to implement sweeping reforms were met with increasing resistance, while his efforts to navigate Afghanistan's complex geopolitical position only further isolated his regime. By the time he assumed the title of chairman of the Revolutionary Council, prime minister, and general secretary of the PDPA, Amin found himself at the center of a rapidly unraveling situation. The domestic landscape, unrest, and repression. Amin's leadership was marked by an ambitious agenda to transform Afghanistan into a socialist state. However, these efforts were hindered by widespread unrest. The PDPA's reforms, particularly land redistribution and gender equality initiatives, alienated much of the population. Rural communities, deeply rooted in Islamic traditions and tribal hierarchies, viewed these changes as an assault on their way of life. Clerics and tribal leaders, many of whom wielded significant influence in their regions, led the charge in opposing Amin's policies, accusing the regime of being anti-Islamic. In response to this resistance, Amin intensified his use of state power to suppress dissent. Thousands of individuals, including tribal leaders, clerics, and other perceived counter-revolutionaries, were arrested or executed. The government's security forces carried out mass purges, targeting anyone suspected of opposing the PDPA's socialist agenda. These measures, while aimed at stabilizing the regime, only fueled further discontent. Armed uprisings erupted across the country, with resistance movements gaining momentum in provinces like Nuristan, Paktia, and Herat. Amin's reliance on repression underscored the fragile nature of his rule. While he maintained control over key urban centers and military installations, much of the countryside slipped out of the government's grasp. The growing insurgency, coupled with defections from the Afghan military, highlighted the regime's inability to secure widespread support. Relations with the Soviet Union, a fractured alliance. From the outset of his leadership, Amin's relationship with the Soviet Union, Afghanistan's primary ally and benefactor, was fraught with tension. Although the USSR had played a crucial role in supporting the PDPA's rise to power, Soviet leaders grew increasingly distrustful of Amin. They viewed his leadership style as erratic and criticized his heavy-handed approach to governance. The purges and executions carried out under his orders were seen as destabilizing, undermining the PDPA's legitimacy and fueling the insurgency. Amin's attempts to assert Afghanistan's independence further strained relations with Moscow. He sought to reduce the country's reliance on the Soviet Union by exploring diplomatic engagements with other nations, including the United States. This approach alarmed Soviet leaders, who feared that Amin might shift Afghanistan's foreign policy orientation. Reports of Amin's meetings with American diplomats and his overtures to Pakistan only deepened Soviet suspicions. By late 1979, the Soviet leadership under Leonid Brezhnev had grown disillusioned with Amin. Discussions within the Kremlin increasingly revolved around the need to replace him with a more reliable and compliant leader. The deteriorating security situation in Afghanistan, coupled with fears of losing influence in the region, prompted the Soviets to consider direct intervention. Efforts to stabilize the regime. Despite the mounting challenges, Amin remained resolute in his efforts to stabilize his regime. He intensified propaganda campaigns to bolster the PDPA's image, portraying the party as a champion of the people and a defender of Afghanistan's sovereignty. Amin himself sought to project an image of strength and decisiveness, emphasizing his commitment to reform and modernization. Amin's administration also launched initiatives to address some of the population's grievances. Efforts were made to improve infrastructure, expand access to education, and modernize healthcare services. These measures, however, were overshadowed by the widespread perception of the regime as oppressive and disconnected from the realities of Afghan society. The government's inability to win the hearts and minds of the people further eroded its legitimacy. The shadow of internal dissent. Within the PDPA, Amin faced opposition from members of the Paghman faction, many of whom resented his consolidation of power and the sidelining of their leaders. Although key Paghman figures, such as Babrak Karmal, had been sent abroad as ambassadors, their influence remained significant. From their positions in foreign capitals, these exiled leaders lobbied for Soviet support, presenting themselves as more reliable alternatives to Amin. The internal dissent within the PDPA mirrored the broader divisions within Afghan society. The Khalq faction's dominance under Amin's leadership alienated many within the party, further weakening its cohesion. These internal fractures, combined with the external pressures of the insurgency and Soviet mistrust, created a precarious environment for Amin's administration. The road to intervention. As 1979 drew to a close, the situation in Afghanistan reached a critical juncture. The insurgency showed no signs of abating, and Amin's regime appeared increasingly isolated. In Moscow, discussions about Afghanistan's future intensified, with Soviet leaders concluding that Amin's removal was necessary to stabilize the country and protect Soviet interests. Plans for a military intervention, which had been under consideration for months, began to take shape. Unbeknownst to Amin, the Soviet Union had already made contact with Babrak Karmal and other exiled Paghman leaders, securing their cooperation for a planned regime change. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation that would not only end Amin's rule, but also plunge Afghanistan into a decade of conflict and foreign occupation. The final days. In his final months in power, Hafizullah Amin remained steadfast in his belief that he could overcome the challenges facing his regime. He continued to emphasize the PDPA's revolutionary goals, insisting that the party's vision for Afghanistan would ultimately prevail. However, the combination of domestic unrest, international isolation, and Soviet hostility proved insurmountable. As Soviet troops prepared to enter Afghanistan, Amin's leadership faced its ultimate test. The events that followed would not only reshape the course of Afghan history, but also mark the end of Amin's controversial and tumultuous tenure as one of the country's most polarizing leaders. Part 7. The Soviet invasion in Amin's final days. By December 1979, the volatile situation in Afghanistan had reached a breaking point. Hafizullah Amin, who had risen to the pinnacle of power as Afghanistan's head of state, faced insurmountable challenges from both domestic insurgencies and international intrigue. The Soviet Union, once a crucial ally, had grown deeply disillusioned with Amin's leadership. Behind closed doors, plans were being finalized in Moscow for a decisive intervention that would end Amin's rule and reshape Afghanistan's future. The path to Soviet intervention. The relationship between Hafizullah Amin and the Soviet leadership had been steadily deteriorating since his ascent to power. Amin's efforts to assert Afghanistan's independence, including overtures to the United States and Pakistan, were viewed with suspicion by the Kremlin. The purges and executions carried out under Amin's orders further alienated Soviet leaders, who perceived his actions as destabilizing and counterproductive to the goals of the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, PDPA. In early December 1979, the Soviet Politburo, under the leadership of General Secretary Leonid Brezhnev, made the fateful decision to intervene militarily in Afghanistan. The official rationale for the intervention was to stabilize the PDPA government and prevent Afghanistan from drifting away from the Soviet sphere of influence. Unofficially, the Soviets sought to remove Amin, whom they regarded as unreliable and increasingly antagonistic, and replace him with a more compliant leader, Babrak Karmal of the Paghman faction. Plans for the intervention were meticulously crafted under the supervision of the KGB and the Soviet military. Operation Storm 333, the code name for the assault on Amin's residence, was a key component of the broader invasion strategy. Soviet forces began massing along Afghanistan's borders, while diplomatic channels maintained the illusion of continued support for Amin's regime. Preparations for the coup. Unaware of the full extent of Soviet plans, Amin continued to assert his authority in the weeks leading up to the invasion. He moved his residence to the heavily fortified Taj Beg Palace, believing it to be secure against any potential threats. Amin's trust in the Soviet Union remained steadfast, despite mounting evidence of their dissatisfaction with his rule. When Afghan intelligence reported that the Soviets might be planning a coup, Amin dismissed these warnings as imperialist propaganda designed to sow distrust between Kabul and Moscow. Amin's confidence in his position was further bolstered by the arrival of additional Soviet troops in Kabul. Officially, these forces were deployed to protect the PDPA government from insurgents, but in reality, they were part of the invasion force. Soviet advisors embedded within Afghanistan's military and government provided critical intelligence for the planned coup, ensuring that every detail was accounted for. The assault on Taj Beg Palace. On the night of December 27, 1979, Soviet forces launched Operation Storm 333. Elite units of the KGB's Alpha Group and the Soviet military's Spetsnaz stormed Taj Beg Palace, where Amin and his family were residing. The attack was swift and brutal, with heavy fighting breaking out between Soviet forces and Amin's guards. Despite the palace's formidable defenses, the overwhelming firepower and coordination of the Soviet assault proved decisive. Amin, who had been dining with guests when the assault began, initially believed that the attack was the work of Afghan insurgents. As the situation unfolded, he reportedly expressed disbelief that the Soviets, whom he had considered allies, were behind the operation. Attempts to coordinate a defense proved futile, and the resistance within the palace was quickly subdued. Amid the chaos, Amin was fatally wounded. Accounts of his death vary, but it is widely believed that he was either killed during the firefight or executed shortly thereafter by Soviet operatives. His son and other family members were also killed, while surviving members of his household were taken into custody. The aftermath. Following Amin's death, Soviet forces quickly secured Kabul and installed Babrak Karmal as the new leader of Afghanistan. Karmal, who had been living in exile in Eastern Europe, was flown into Kabul to assume his new role as General Secretary of the PDPA and head of state. The Soviet invasion marked the beginning of a decade-long occupation that would have profound consequences for Afghanistan and the broader region. For many Afghans, the Soviet intervention confirmed their worst fears about foreign interference in their country's affairs. The invasion galvanized opposition to the PDPA government, fueling the insurgency that would evolve into a full-scale jihad against Soviet forces. The Mujahideen, a coalition of armed resistance groups, gained strength and support from foreign powers, including the United States, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. Amin's legacy. Hafizullah Amin remains one of the most controversial figures in Afghanistan's modern history. His brief tenure as leader was marked by bold reforms, ruthless repression, and an unwavering commitment to his vision of a socialist Afghanistan. While his policies aimed to modernize the country and dismantle feudal structures, they also alienated large segments of the population and exacerbated existing divisions. Amin's downfall highlights the complexities of revolutionary leadership in a deeply traditional and geopolitically significant nation. His reliance on Soviet support, coupled with his attempts to assert independence, placed him in an untenable position. The events surrounding his death and the subsequent Soviet invasion underscore the challenges faced by leaders who seek to navigate the turbulent waters of ideology, power, and foreign influence. As Afghanistan grappled with the consequences of Soviet intervention and the ensuing decades of conflict, Amin's legacy remained a subject of intense debate. For some, he is remembered as a visionary reformer whose ambitions were thwarted by external forces. For others, he is a cautionary tale of hubris and the dangers of authoritarian rule. Part 8. The Aftermath of Amin's Reign and the Legacy of the Soviet Intervention. The death of Hafizullah Amin and the Soviet Union's subsequent occupation of Afghanistan in December 1979 marked the beginning of a new and deeply turbulent era in the nation's history. The transition of power from Amin to Babrak Karmal, facilitated by Moscow, was intended to stabilize Afghanistan and secure Soviet influence in the region. However, the intervention triggered widespread resistance, igniting a conflict that would define Afghanistan's trajectory for decades to come. Babrak Karmal and the Soviet occupation. Following Amin's assassination during the storming of the Tajbeg Palace, Babrak Karmal, a leader of the Parcham faction of the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, PDPA, was installed as the new head of state. Karmal's ascension to power was accompanied by a massive influx of Soviet troops, signaling the beginning of a full-scale occupation. Officially framed as an effort to support the Afghan government against counter-revolutionary forces, the intervention was widely perceived as an act of imperialism. Under Karmal's leadership, the PDPA attempted to distance itself from the repressive policies of Hafizullah Amin. Efforts were made to portray the new government as more inclusive and conciliatory, with promises of amnesty for political prisoners and a renewed commitment to Islamic values. These initiatives, however, were overshadowed by the reality of foreign occupation and the increasing militarization of the conflict. The Soviet presence in Afghanistan faced immediate and widespread opposition. The Mujahideen, a coalition of armed resistance groups, emerged as the primary force challenging the PDPA and its Soviet backers. Drawing support from rural communities, religious leaders, and foreign powers, the Mujahideen waged a guerrilla war that would engulf the country in violence and devastation. The escalation of conflict, the Soviet-Afghan War, which began in earnest following Amin's death, proved to be a protracted and brutal conflict. Soviet forces equipped with advanced weaponry and superior resources initially sought to suppress the insurgency through overwhelming force. Cities and rural areas alike were subjected to heavy bombardments, resulting in significant civilian casualties and mass displacement. Despite their technological advantages, the Soviet military struggled to contain the Mujahideen's guerrilla tactics. The resistance fighters, bolstered by financial and material support from the United States, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and other nations, used their intimate knowledge of Afghanistan's rugged terrain to great effect. The conflict soon became a quagmire, with neither side able to achieve a decisive victory. The human toll of the war was staggering. Millions of Afghans were killed, wounded, or displaced, with entire villages destroyed in the crossfire. The country's infrastructure was decimated, and its economy collapsed under the strain of prolonged violence. For many Afghans, the war represented a profound betrayal of their sovereignty and a deepening of the divisions that had plagued the nation for decades. Revisiting Amin's legacy. In the years following his death, Hafizullah Amin's legacy became a subject of intense debate among historians, political analysts, and the Afghan people. Supporters of Amin argue that he was a visionary leader whose attempts to modernize Afghanistan were undermined by external interference and internal resistance. They point to his efforts to promote education, gender equality, and land reform as evidence of his commitment to progress. Critics, however, contend that Amin's authoritarian methods and reliance on repression alienated much of the population and exacerbated existing divisions. His policies, while ambitious, were often implemented without regard for Afghanistan's deeply entrenched cultural and religious traditions. Furthermore, his consolidation of power and purges of perceived opponents created an atmosphere of fear and mistrust within the PDPA and beyond. Amin's interactions with the Soviet Union also remain a point of contention. While he initially relied on Soviet support to advance his revolutionary agenda, his attempts to assert independence ultimately contributed to his downfall. The events leading to his death and the Soviet invasion underscore the complexities of navigating Afghanistan's geopolitical position, caught between the ambitions of global powers. The long-term impact of the Soviet intervention. The Soviet invasion and the subsequent war had far-reaching consequences for Afghanistan and the world. The conflict not only devastated Afghanistan, but also played a significant role in the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union. The financial and human costs of the war, combined with mounting domestic opposition, weakened Moscow's ability to sustain its influence on the global stage. For Afghanistan, the war left a legacy of destruction and instability. The Mujahideen's victory following the Soviet withdrawal in 1989 failed to bring peace, as rival factions turned on one another in a brutal civil war. The rise of the Taliban in the 1980s and the subsequent US-led intervention in 2001 further entrenched cycles of conflict and foreign involvement. Hafizullah Amin's brief and controversial tenure as Afghanistan's leader remains emblematic of the challenges faced by the country's modernizers. His vision of a socialist Afghanistan, while ambitious, collided with the realities of a deeply traditional society and the machinations of global geopolitics. The consequences of his leadership in the Soviet intervention it precipitated continue to shape Afghanistan's history and identity. As Afghanistan continues to grapple with the legacies of conflict and foreign intervention, the period of Hafizullah Amin's rule offers valuable insights into the complexities of revolutionary leadership and state building. His story serves as a reminder of the profound challenges faced by leaders seeking to transform deeply rooted systems and the enduring impact of external forces on a nation's destiny. For better or worse, Amin's tenure remains a pivotal chapter in the history of Afghanistan, one that continues to provoke reflection and debate. Part 9, Lessons from Hafizullah Amin's Era and the Broader Implications for Revolutionary Leadership. The brief and controversial reign of Hafizullah Amin offers a wealth of lessons about the complexities of revolutionary leadership, state building, and the precariousness of navigating geopolitics in a divided and traditional society. Although Amin's tenure lasted only a few months, his policies, actions, and ultimate downfall had lasting implications for Afghanistan and the broader region. This chapter examines the broader themes emerging from Amin's leadership and the historical context that shaped and was shaped by his rule. The pitfalls of authoritarian modernization. Amin's vision for Afghanistan was rooted in a Marxist-Leninist framework that sought to dismantle the country's feudal structures, redistribute wealth, and promote social equality. However, his authoritarian approach to implementing these reforms alienated much of the population. The forced redistribution of land, aggressive promotion of gender equality, and the marginalization of religious and tribal leaders were perceived as direct attacks on Afghanistan's deeply entrenched traditions and values. Modernization efforts that ignore the social and cultural fabric of a nation often face significant resistance, and Amin's policies were no exception. His failure to engage with the broader population and his reliance on coercion rather than consensus building exacerbated divisions within Afghan society. The resistance to Amin's reforms highlights the importance of tailoring revolutionary agendas to the specific historical and cultural context of a country. Internal divisions and the fragmentation of revolutionary movements. The internal divisions within the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, PDPA, played a critical role in Amin's downfall. The rivalry between the Khalq and Paghman factions, which had existed since the party's inception, intensified after the Saur Revolution. Amin's efforts to consolidate power within the Khalq faction alienated key figures in the Paghman faction, such as Babrak Karmal, who leveraged their connections with the Soviet Union to undermine his leadership. This factionalism weakened the PDPA's ability to govern effectively and presented an opportunity for external actors to exploit these divisions. Amin's inability to unify the party under a cohesive vision underscores the challenges revolutionary leaders face when navigating internal rivalries. It also serves as a reminder of the importance of building broad-based coalitions to sustain transformative agendas. The role of foreign powers in revolutionary states. Amin's relationship with the Soviet Union was both a cornerstone of his rise to power and a factor in his demise. Initially reliant on Soviet support to consolidate the PDPA's rule, Amin's attempts to assert independence and explore alternative alliances raised alarm in Moscow. The Soviet leadership, increasingly distrustful of Amin's intentions, ultimately decided to remove him through a military intervention. The events surrounding Amin's downfall illustrate the precariousness of revolutionary states that depend on foreign powers for survival. External support can provide crucial resources and legitimacy, but it often comes with strings attached. For Afghanistan, the Soviet intervention not only ended Amin's rule, but also plunged the country into a prolonged conflict that had devastating consequences for its people and institutions. The consequences of repression. Amin's reliance on repression to maintain control further alienated his government from the Afghan populace. The mass arrests, executions, and purges carried out under his orders created an atmosphere of fear and mistrust, both within the PDPA and among the general population. These actions undermined the government's legitimacy and fueled the insurgency that would eventually challenge Soviet forces as well. The use of repression as a tool of governance often provides only short-term stability at the cost of long-term unrest. Amin's tenure underscores the dangers of prioritizing coercion over dialogue and inclusion. Revolutionary leaders seeking to implement transformative change must strike a delicate balance between enforcing their vision and fostering genuine support from the population. The legacy of revolutionary leadership. Hafizullah Amin's leadership represents a cautionary tale about the challenges and contradictions of revolutionary governance. His ambitious vision for Afghanistan was undermined by his authoritarian methods, internal party divisions, and the complexities of navigating geopolitics. While his policies sought to modernize and transform Afghanistan, their implementation often deepened societal fractures and provoked widespread resistance. Amin's legacy also highlights the broader dynamics of revolutionary movements in the 20th century. Many such movements face similar challenges, including the tension between ideology and pragmatism, the role of foreign powers, and the difficulty of reconciling transformative agendas with deeply rooted traditions. For historians and political analysts, Amin's era provides a valuable case study for understanding the successes and failures of revolutionary leadership. The enduring impact on Afghanistan. The consequences of Amin's rule and the subsequent Soviet intervention continue to shape Afghanistan's political and social landscape. The decade-long conflict that followed his death devastated the country, leaving a legacy of destruction, displacement, and division. The rise of the Mujahideen, the Taliban, and the subsequent US-led intervention can all be traced back to the dynamics set in motion during Amin's tenure. For Afghanistan, the lessons of this period remain deeply relevant. The challenges of balancing modernization with tradition, navigating internal divisions, and managing external influences persist to this day. Amin's story serves as a reminder of the complexities of leadership in a country at the crossroads of history and geopolitics. Part 10. Reflections on Hafizullah Amin's legacy in contemporary context. The life and political career of Hafizullah Amin remains subjects of intense debate and analysis, not only within Afghanistan, but also in the broader discourse on revolutionary leadership and state building. While his tenure was marked by dramatic reforms, authoritarianism, and ultimate collapse, the broader implications of his rule continue to resonate in Afghanistan's complex history. This final part delves into how Amin's legacy is viewed in contemporary Afghanistan and the lessons his story offers for the future. Revisiting the reforms, a visionary or a misguided leader? Hafizullah Amin's reforms were ambitious, aiming to modernize Afghanistan along Marxist-Leninist lines. His land redistribution policies, efforts to promote gender equality, and initiatives to expand education were bold and forward-thinking. However, these changes were introduced in a society deeply rooted in tribal, Islamic, and feudal traditions. The pace and manner of implementation, often perceived as heavy-handed, alienated key segments of Afghan society, particularly rural communities and religious leaders. From a contemporary perspective, some of Amin's policies align with global norms on human rights and modernization. For instance, Gender equality and universal education are widely recognized as cornerstones of progressive governance. Yet the context of his reforms, imposed without sufficient grassroots support or understanding of local sensitivities, serves as a cautionary tale about the limits of top-down approaches to societal transformation. The legacy of authoritarianism. Amin's rule was characterized by an unwavering commitment to consolidating power and suppressing dissent. His reliance on repression, including mass arrests, executions, and purges, created an atmosphere of fear and deepened societal divisions. While such measures may have provided short-term stability, they also sowed the seeds of long-term unrest. The resistance movements that emerged during his tenure eventually coalesced into the Mujahideen, whose struggle against the Soviet-backed government would define Afghanistan's political trajectory for decades. In the context of Afghanistan's subsequent history, Amin's authoritarianism is often viewed as a precursor to the cycles of violence and repression that have plagued the country. His reliance on coercion rather than consensus building underscores the challenges faced by leaders seeking to balance authority with inclusivity in deeply divided societies. Afghanistan in the shadow of geopolitics. Hafizullah Amin's tenure also highlights the complexities of navigating Afghanistan's position at the crossroads of global geopolitics. His initial reliance on Soviet support, followed by attempts to assert independence and engage with other powers, underscored the precariousness of Afghanistan's sovereignty. The Soviet invasion that followed his death not only ended his rule, but also plunged Afghanistan into a devastating conflict that reshaped the region. Today, Afghanistan's geopolitical challenges remain strikingly similar. The country continues to be a focal point for competing interests among global and regional powers. Amin's story serves as a reminder of the need for Afghan leaders to carefully balance external alliances while safeguarding national sovereignty and addressing internal divisions. The cultural and historical memory of Amin. Within Afghanistan, perceptions of Hafizullah Amin vary widely depending on political, ethnic, and generational factors. For some, he is remembered as a reformer whose vision for a modern Afghanistan was thwarted by external interference and internal resistance. For others, he is a symbol of repression and authoritarianism, whose actions exacerbated societal fractures and invited foreign occupation. The discourse around Amin's legacy reflects broader debates about Afghanistan's identity and future. His tenure is often invoked in discussions about the challenges of modernization, the role of Islam in governance, and the impact of foreign influence on Afghan sovereignty. As Afghanistan continues to grapple with these issues, the lessons of Amin's rule remain deeply relevant. Lessons for contemporary leadership. Hafizullah Amin's story offers several critical lessons for contemporary leaders, both within Afghanistan and beyond. The importance of inclusivity. Successful governance requires the support and participation of diverse segments of society. Amin's failure to engage with religious, tribal, and rural communities undermined his reforms and fueled resistance. Balancing reform with tradition. Societal transformation must be carefully calibrated to respect cultural and historical contexts. Rapid and imposed changes, as seen during Amin's tenure, often provoke backlash. Managing external alliances. Reliance on foreign powers can provide short-term benefits, but often comes at the cost of sovereignty and long-term stability. Amin's relationship with the Soviet Union illustrates the risks of becoming entangled in the agendas of external actors. Avoiding the trap of authoritarianism. While centralizing power may offer immediate control, it often leads to alienation and unrest. Amin's reliance on repression highlights the limitations of authoritarian approaches to governance. Conclusion. A pivotal chapter in Afghan history. Hafizullah Amin's tenure as Afghanistan's leader was brief but profoundly impactful. His ambitious vision for a socialist Afghanistan collided with the realities of a deeply traditional society and the geopolitical machinations of the Cold War. The consequences of his leadership, both positive and negative, continue to shape Afghanistan's political and social landscape. As Afghanistan navigates its path forward, Amin's story serves as a reminder of the complexities and challenges of leadership in a nation at the crossroads of history and geopolitics. His legacy, marked by both promise and controversy, remains a pivotal chapter in the broader narrative of Afghanistan's quest for stability, sovereignty, and progress.